Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 69 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is beef sukiyaki. In Japan, there are many restaurants that serve only this dish. Some have been in business for hundreds of years, and some of the best are in Kyoto. You will practice slicing beef very thinly and will learn a useful technique, topping eggs. Both of these techniques will require the delicate touch you've been cultivating. This is a fantastic guest participation dish. The challenge is to prepare all of the separate components, present them artistically, and demonstrate the dish to your guests with panache. Techniques today are trimming beef and asparagus, topping eggs, marinating scallions, slicing beef and slicing it very thinly, blanching and shocking, scoring, seasoning, sautéing, bringing to a boil and simmering, creative presentation, and audience participation. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 69, which is beef sukiyaki. I gotta tell you, I love this audience participation dish. We're gonna need a thick New York strip steak. Now, I'd like it to be about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. I couldn't get that. This is about 1 inch thick, so you probably need 2 if you only have about, if they're only about 1 inch thick. And then we're gonna trim off this fat that's along the top here. There's a piece of fat that's thin, gets thicker, comes to a point, and then it tapers off toward the end. We're going to take our filleting knife, you could use a slicing knife as well, and just cut right around that piece of fat and cut it right off. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the freezer, put it on a plate, put it on a sizzle plate, cover it, put it in the freezer for about 30 to 45 minutes. You want it to get firm but not rock solid, okay? All right, so I'm gonna put it into the freezer right now. Okay, we're also gonna need eggs. We're gonna need 1 egg per person, and we're gonna need a carton too, so I left them in the carton. We're gonna need to have 2 pieces of scallion that have been cut off the root at the end, and then cut pieces that are about 1.5 inches long. You wanna have 2 per person, okay? So it just depends on how many people you're going to serve. The description calls for 8, so it'd be 16 pieces. Then you're going to need to have a 1/2 cup of rice vinegar that has been sweetened with about 1 teaspoon of sugar. I'm not going to do that mixing and sweetening on camera. You can just do that yourself. So you're going to need, again, about 1/2 cup of rice vinegar sweetened with about 1 teaspoon of sugar. And you can keep that at room temperature. Then you're going to need about 2 large shiitake mushrooms per person that have been sliced about 1/4 inch thick. Take the stems off, keep the stems to make mushroom stock or for some other purpose. And that's about 1.5 ounces of shiitake mushrooms per person. Okay? And that's probably a better measure because if I say large shiitake mushrooms, some are larger than others. You're going to need about 1 cup of soy sauce. It doesn't have to be expensive soy sauce. And about 1 cup of mirin. You need to have some high smoke point oil. I'm using avo oil tonight. You can use canola or peanut as well, or grapeseed. Kosher salt and a pepper mill. Okay, that's all the ingredients that we need. We'll break, come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 69. Actually, I forgot one of the ingredients that's in the description. You're going to need some asparagus spears. 1 asparagus spear per person that's been cut into 3 pieces. I cut them on a diagonal so it looks better, okay? And they already need to have been blanched and shocked in an ice bath. So 1 per person, blanched and shocked, and then blotted dry. I forgot them because I've been blanching them and they were behind me in the ice bath. Okay, that is all the ingredients. We'll come back and we'll talk about the equipment. Okay, for lesson 69, we're gonna need a cutting board and chef's knife. We're gonna need a filleting knife to remove the fat from the beef, although you could use a slicing knife as well, and we'll be using a slicing knife too, so we'll need that. We'll need to have a blanching pot, which is on the stove. You're going to use that to blanch the asparagus, and then a bowl for an ice bath full of ice so that you can plunge the asparagus into the ice bath and stop the cooking. Then we'll need a container to mix the vinegar and sugar to marinate the scallions. I'm just going to mix it right in this pan that I'm going to marinate them in. It's flat bottomed. I think it's perfect. It's about the perfect size to put these pieces of scallion into. Just going to put the sweet vinegar in there and let the scallions soak in that vinegar. We'll also need to have a serving platter for the beef. I'm only doing for 2 tonight, so I have a smaller serving platter. If you're doing all 8, you're going to probably need a larger serving platter than this. You'll need to have plastic wrap. I buy it in bulk. This is the Kirkland brand, 3,000 feet. Comes from Costco. You'll also need to have an egg topping device. Now there are different types of egg topping devices. This one has like these little teeth that come out when you squeeze this like scissors, okay? And they'll cut off the top of the egg. There are others as well where you sit them on top of the egg, you pull up the plunger and you let it fall down, and that causes just the top of the egg to crack. You can take off the top. We're going to use this one today. You also need to have an egg carton, okay? And then we'll need to have a saucepan and a spoon to mix the sukiyaki sauce in. And you'll need to have some kind of a vessel to pour that sauce. Now, this is all going to be done in front of the guests at the table. And in fact, they're going to be pouring in many cases. You want everything to look good, okay? So you're going to need to have some kind of a vessel that looks good that you can have at the table for pouring. Then you're going to need to have a plate to serve the raw ingredients that the guests are then going to cook. Okay, now we have asparagus, mushrooms, scallions, and an egg, right? So I'm going to use this plate here, which can hold an egg right here. We're going to put the mushrooms in this section, and I'm going to put the scallion pieces and the asparagus in this section here. Now, you may not have anything like this, but you should have an egg cup. If you don't have an egg cup, you could just use a little, tiny little bowl that you can put the egg in. You can put some salt in there to hold it in place. And then you might need to have as many as 3 separate plates for the asparagus, the mushrooms, and the scallions. 3 separate plates per person, plus the egg cup, okay? This is basically a Japanese dish, and the Japanese use a lot of dishes, okay? Then you'll need to have what I call an eating plate, okay? Now in Japan, when a dish is served to you, like sushi for example, it's often served out in front of you, and then you're given a little plate that you can hold in front of you and put your sushi on it, maybe dip it in some sauce, maybe put some sauce in the pan. Now, so this is what we're going to be using as our eating plate today. You could use any kind of a plate, but I think this is perfect because we're going to be pouring the egg into this, right? We want it to be contained. So ideally, you'll have something that's not too big in diameter and that has ideally a flat bottom and that has sides about 3/4 of an inch high, so that you can get the things into it. You're going to be dipping things into this when your guests cook them and then eat them. Then you'll need to have some chopsticks. I'm using Japanese chopsticks. What's the difference? Japanese chopsticks are pointed. Chinese chopsticks are not pointed. They're more of a square tip or round, or a wide or round tip, but not pointed. Then you'll also need to have some kind of a vessel to pour the oil in, okay? Now, that's going to be poured also by you or by the guests as they're cooking. So you want it to look nice, something that looks nice. I'm going to put the oil in here, we're going to pour it from here. Kind of comes to a little bit of a point, so it will pour out of their well, I think. Then we're going to need to have a cast iron skillet. Not a real wide one, this is about 9 or 10 inches wide. And then finally, we're going to need to have a butane burner. Now this burner can be put right on the table, and you take a butane can and you put that into the side here, close it up, turn it on, and then you get a flame here. And that's what we're going to use for the cooking. Your guests are going to do all the cooking for this preparation. Okay, that's all the, and you can get these, by the way, these are very, very easy to get. You can probably get them at Home Depot, most hardware stores, get them at Lowe's, Ace. I got this from Amazon. I think it was about $25. Okay, that is all of the equipment. We'll break now, come back, and start cooking. All right, the first thing on our prep list is to marinate the scallions. So I'm pouring the sweetened vinegar over the scallions, and we're going to cover them up, and we're going to let them marinate for at least an hour. It doesn't need to be more than 2. And it can be at room temperature. Okay, the next thing on our prep list is to TOP the eggs. I can't use that word because if I say that word, it may turn the camera off. Okay, so first of all, I've washed the eggs. I'm only going to do 2. We're going to take this egg topper. See, as you squeeze the handles, the teeth come inside here, right? So what we're going to do is try to come up closer to the camera and just squeeze. Oh, by the way, take the pointy end of the egg, okay? Not the more rounded end of the, egg, but use the pointy end of the egg. Put that inside of the egg topper, and then, slipping off. Let's turn it over and see how that works. There we go. Okay, see, and the egg top came off just very nicely. All right, now we're going to put that back into the egg carton because we're going to put these back into the fridge until we're ready to use them. Do the same thing with this one. A little bit of the white's going to run out when you do that. It's okay. All right, now I'm only going to do 2. So we're going to just close the carton back up, put them back in the refrigerator until we're ready to serve. Okay, now it's time to heat up our mirin and our soy sauce. I'm using Japanese soy sauce because it's a Japanese dish. And we're going to bring this to a boil, okay? So I'm going to use like a little bit more than medium heat. Bring it to a boil. After it comes to a boil, we're going to reduce the heat and simmer it for about 5 minutes. I don't want to reduce the volume. I don't want it boiling off. I just want to cook off the alcohol. So we're going to just bring it to a boil, then turn the heat down to low for about 5 minutes. After it's simmered for about 5 minutes, we're going to pour it right into the serving vessel and keep it warm until we're ready to serve. Okay, so our beef has been in the freezer for about 45 minutes, but that's going to depend upon your freezer, okay? We need to get it off of the sizzle plate here, and then we're going to cut it at a steep angle, okay? Now, we're going to be slicing this, but, and again, we want this to be firm, but not rock solid. If it's rock solid, it's going to be too hard to cut. All right, so I want to cut through it, and I'm going to put this back in the freezer so that it stays firm while we cut this piece. All right, now what we want to do is cut this into pieces that are about 1/8 of an inch thick. And the reason we freeze it is because it's a lot easier to get those thin slices if the beef is very cold. I mean, really just frozen but not rock solid, okay? And we want to slice these about 1/8 of an inch thick and then keep them in the same orientation to each other. That'll be easier to plate them up in an attractive way. Now, why are we cutting them on a steep angle like this? Get bigger pieces that way. When you get down to the end, it can help to use a fork to hold it in place. And if you can't get the slices out of the end piece, save the end piece for something else. Also, there's a whole lot more fat down there toward the end, so you might not want to be serving that to your guests. So we're going to keep this for another purpose. And we're going to take our serving platter and we're going to arrange this beef on the serving platter in an attractive way. Okay, now we're going to cut the other piece. Okay, now let's put that on our platter. Now this is one steak. As I said, I wanted one that was about 1.5 inches thick. I could only get one that was about 1 inch thick. So this is enough for 4 people as a small plate. Remember, we're doing small plates here, okay? If we had one steak that was about 1.5 inches thick, you might be able to get enough, probably would get enough for 8 people, but it'd be better just to use 2 steaks. Let's put this back, let's cover this and put this back in the fridge, or put it in the fridge because it's been in the freezer. Put this in the fridge until we are ready to serve. Now we're going to be serving in about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm taking this beef out of the fridge and letting it come to room temperature. I'm going to leave it covered until we're just about ready to serve. We're going to bring it to room temp. Now because these slices are very thin, it won't take long at all for it to come to room temp. Okay, now here we have our setup for serving. Okay, so we have our butane burner and our cast iron skillet on top. The butane is already inside the burner. We have our beef platter, and we have our oil that will, our high smoke point oil that we'll be pouring into the pan. And here we have our sauce that we'll also be using. That was the mirin and the soy sauce mixture. Then we have, for each guest, we have an eating plate with Japanese chopsticks. We have our shiitake mushrooms. We have 3 pieces of asparagus. It's 2 pieces plus a tip. We have 2 marinated pieces of scallion and 1 egg. All right? Same thing for the other guest. Okay? And now we want to turn on the heat on our burner. You'll follow the instructions for the from the manufacturer for how to use your burner. And you know, cast iron really gets nice and hot. Once it's hot, we may want to turn down the heat or even turn it off. But for right now, we're going to put the heat on about medium. Okay? And then we're going to let that warm up. Now while the cast iron is heating up, we're going to take our eggs, put them into our eating plate. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the other guest. The guests will be doing this themselves, actually. You'll instruct them to take their egg and pour it into the eating plate. Then you'll tell them to take their chopsticks and mix it up inside the eating plate. You know, it doesn't have to be perfectly mixed. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be cooking the beef and the vegetables, then we're going to be dipping it in here and eating it. Eating it with the raw egg may freak some people out, but that's what Sukiyaki is. The Japanese have been doing it for hundreds of years. We're getting some light smoke off of our cast iron pan here. We're going to add some oil. Okay? Let that get hot. I'm going to swirl it around a little bit. Let it cover the pan. I'm going to turn the heat down to minimum. Okay, now it's time to cook. Okay, so your guest will take a piece of beef, put it into the pan, swirl it around a little bit so you get a little bit of the oil on the beef, and then pour just a little bit of sauce over it. Okay, doesn't take much, and it doesn't take long to cook this beef because it's so thin. Probably only 20-30 seconds, right? Then we take it out and we swirl it in the egg. And then we eat it. Now, what you see happening here is that you've obviously have the raw egg in there, but you're also getting the flavor. I'm going to turn this even lower. You're getting the flavor of the sauce and the beef mixed in with that. So you're going to cook all of these pieces, right? And as you cook them, that egg is going to take on more and more flavor, right? I'm going to do the same thing with the mushrooms and the scallions and the asparagus and the beef. You'll take turns with them. Your guests will take turns with them. And I'm going to toast with a little sake. Kanpai. This is a Tenko 50 Heavenly Grace, made in Akita, Japan. Excellent stuff. Now you may have to add more oil from time to time. And you'll probably have to play with the heat on the burner to get it just right so that it's not cooking too fast, it's not burning. And right now I have it on the lowest setting. Now, things like the mushrooms, they're going to take a lot longer to cook than that beef does. Beef just takes seconds. And you and your guests can swirl them around in there. Let them cook until you're happy with them, okay? If you like it to be kind of firm, take it out earlier. If you like it to be softer and more cooked, leave it in longer. And then when you're ready, take it out. Dip it in the egg. And eat it. Excellent. Okay, that's lesson 69, beef sukiyaki. You can see photos of the final dish on my Instagram, which is @Chef's Apprentice, cook like a pro. Next up is a special invention of mine called a soup within a soup. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.